Welcome in. You have found the multicast that has its eyes on Texas football and Texas athletics. It's a product of the Republic of Football on Dave Campbell's Texas Football Podcast Network. We are live at the Austin Radio Network headquarters overlooking the capital city and downtown, the 40 acres. This is episode 4 of the show and multicast whose content, depth of knowledge, and insights will be unmatched in Longhorn Nation and a staple for those who understand that the winning tradition and pride of the University of Texas will not be entrusted to the timid or the weak. It's straight talk, it's Texas football, and a little bit of basketball this week. He is Mike Craven, a lifelong Austinite, raised inside the Texas football locker room, currently works as a senior writer at Dave Campbell's Texas Football, formerly with the Austin American-Statesman and Rivals. I'm Erin Hogan, 33 years an Austinite, 24 years a fixture on Morning Drive Radio here in the ATX, currently the co-host of B&E in the Mornings on the Longhorn flagship station, The Horn, and HornFM.com. Michael, how are you, my friend? We missed, not last week, we did not do an episode. You didn't miss it, didn't hit your inbox, or on YouTube or Spotify or iTunes, wherever you catch us. Mike took a beautiful trip to the islands of Hawaii.
I did. It was nice. I love the intro. With the Masters coming up, it makes me feel like how they introduced the golfers on the first tee.
That's exactly right.
Enjoy that a lot. But yeah, a week in Hawaii, and for us at Dave Campbell's, April is the start of magazine season.
So you got that out of the way. And I'm going to say, if you're new to our multicast, hopefully you can go back and listen to any of the previous episodes. It's all evergreen content. We're talking Texas football, Texas basketball. Probably would have done a episode last week had the Longhorns beaten Miami and made it to the Final Four. Even with you in Hawaii, we would have found some guests and did it. But with you being gone, the Longhorns being out, we go ahead and jump forward to this week. But you can always go back and listen to those. Again, it's on the Republic of Football on the Dave Campbell's Texas Football Podcast Network, also on the Horns YouTube page. We'd love for you to watch it. You can certainly listen on Spotify and iTunes, wherever you find podcasts, but we do set up the fancy screens and highlights and make it a visual medium as well for our YouTube audience. We appreciate that. But, you were in the islands, and we break our show up into 4 quarters and a halftime. So we're going to have, at halftime, we're going to have a little fun with your trip to Hawaii because there's major breaking news.
There's some news.
Major breaking news with our man Mike Craven coming up at the halfway point of our show. Also, major breaking news for the multicast. We have our first on-air partner and underwriter who's joining our show, hopefully the first of many who are going to be the founding partners and underwriters of this podcast and of this program as it grows. We're really excited to introduce you to them and that person who's a good friend of mine. We're going to make this thing happen. But again, the 4 quarters, just like a football game. In our first quarter, we're going to talk the Texas basketball program and the decision to hire Rodney Terry as the full-time head coach. The Longhorns brass, the decision maker's decision to do it, and where it takes the program moving forward, right decision or wrong. Also, quarter 2 will shift to football. Texas spring practice through 2/3 of the way through now. The spring game is inside 2 weeks now. Orange-white scrimmage April 15th. We'll focus on the offensive progress in quarter 2, defensive progress in quarter 3, and then in quarter 4, we're going to talk some Texas football recruiting. Since we talked last, before Mike's trip, there was a big junior day. There's been some commitment news, there's recruiting news, and those junior days are always critical for the classes of 2024 and 25. So we'll get some insight on that, and that'll be our roadmap for the show today and this week. And looking forward to having it. So, Mike, back and refreshed, back and feeling good. I mean, we'll get to your details of your Hawaii trip, but got to say, you weren't stuck to your phone, which you took a vacation.
I took a real vacation. I did not open my computer one time.
Well, that's it's hard to do. Now, my kids, I have 3 kids, so when I always used to say, you either take vacations or you take trips. If you're taking your kids with you, it's probably a trip. There's a lot that goes with it. But you just took a total vacation, unplugged, made some breaking news, which we'll talk about coming up. Can't wait to hear about that. But feeling good, ready to go for your busy month of April?
And it helped because nothing big happened across the state. Nobody got fired, nobody got arrested, nothing big where I would have had to take out the computer. So I appreciate everybody
taking it easy.
Along. Yeah.
Well, it was busy around here. I know you don't like traffic and busy in Austin. So right. As a lifelong Austinite, we had Del Match play in NASCAR, and this past weekend was crazy town.
The timing was not an accident.
Get out while everyone's descending on the capital city. Mike Craven is back with us. All right, quarter 1, it's Texas basketball and the decision to hire Rodney Terry full-time. In our first 3 episodes, we certainly talked about it. I think you used the words at some point. It's kind of a no-brainer at this point that Rodney Terry has earned the job. I will give Chris Del Conte the credit that he did, as he has said before. I don't make decisions during the year unless it's forced upon him like Chris Beard was. They had to make a call on that and waited till the season was over. I would point out that we talked about the Bruce Burke situation at tennis. that when Michael Center got caught up in the FBI scandal, the admission scandal, true to his word, Chris Del Conte fired Michael Center because he had to, and then Bruce Burke led the Longhorn men's tennis team to a national championship, and he didn't get the new job until the season was over, even after the Natty. And then even Tom Herman. I always think, we talk about Tom Herman, that a lot of people think Tom Herman was outie after the Texas OU game and the Sam Ellinger, Eyes of Texas flap, and all that went on.
Quinn Ewers decommitted that weekend.
Yes, completely going against the athletic director's wishes and how to handle the Eyes of Texas after games. A lot of people believe Tom Herman was dead man walking at that point. He waited until not just after the season, after the bowl game that Texas won to early January to announce that Tom Herman was not moving forward. So, again, for Texas fans, which we go deep inside the program, this is Chris Del Conte's way. He's going to handle it when the season's over.
And I always thought it was a good idea not to disrupt the waters, right? Like, we felt like he was going to be the head coach. And I think if you polled people outside, he was going to be the head coach as long as he made the Sweet 16 and there wasn't, an early bounce out. But why take away that carrot? It felt like the team was playing for Rodney Terry to prove that he deserved the job. Why change anything going on there? I enjoyed what Chris Del Conte did, but I think ultimately it was a no-brainer to hire Rodney Terry. He's 22-8 as a head coach. Really good in the conference, won the Big 12 tournament, led them to the Elite Eight. That's the longest they've gone, since TJ Ford was on campus. So he had to be the guy.
And if Dylan DeSue doesn't get hurt, and maybe even Marcus Carr midway through the second half at the Miami game in the Elite Eight in Kansas City, who knows? If they're still playing, and we're talking about them in the Final Four, maybe playing tonight. We're recording on a Monday for the national championship, could be. But, I think you're right, too. No-brainer. I also found it interesting the week before the Sweet 16 in Kansas City, the report came out from Kirk Bowles and some other places that there were other suitors for Rodney Terry. Penn State wanted to talk to him. California, Texas Tech may be interested. To me, that's his agent doing his job, making sure, hey, AD, I think we know we're getting the job, but let's not go chinchy on the years. Let's not go chinchy on the money. We have some other options out here. That's just an agent doing his job, getting the news out and the word out that he needed. So I think that is the way it went. I agree with you. It was the right thing. And, the press conference last week was just a lot of positive energy. When the coach walks in and the team is all there, every player on the roster, whether they're coming back or leaving, stood up and gave him a standing ovation. The energy and the Dallas Dodds, who you know very well, came back to be there for the program and for Rodney, who he knows very well. It was just a smooth transition. A really, as bad as things could have gone with the Chris Beard situation, December into January, the wheels could have come off the season, the program, who knows? They made the call, and it landed about as smooth as it could have. To have the right coach who has a lot of ties to the program, who absolutely wants to be here. The players want him here. It seems like the recruits that are coming want him here. And then Chris Beard lands at Ole Miss. He probably not happy the way it went down, but in the end, his personal life got in the way of his job, and he's out. But he's got a fresh start. He wished Rodney Terry well on a conversation they had when Rodney Terry got the job, and everybody moves forward.
Yeah, I think the Texas basketball program is as healthy as it's been in a really long time, and that's with the head coach being fired in the middle of the year. And I think that's the biggest compliment that you can give Rodney Terry is he kept this within the lanes, right? Like you want to be a bumper alley in a bowling lane, and he kept it within the lanes, and they're better off for it. Their recruiting class stayed together, and I think that's the other big part, right? Like as a head, we were talking about Tom Herman earlier. He lost his job as much because of the guys jumping ship on the recruiting trail as he did with the results on the field. Rodney Terry not only had the results on the court, but he has the results in the recruiting, class, and he's got some real big talent coming in.
Mike Craven with the point that when Tom Herman was on his way out, Quinn Ewers decommitted, ended up at Ohio State, and the relationships at every level were crumbling for Tom Herman.
Brockermeyer twins were in that cycle,
and it just feels like Rodney Terry's connections are stronger than ever. Yeah. And I'll say this for Chris Beard, whatever went on with his personal life, it's a bad situation for him. He's no longer with his ex-fiance, and he's moved on. But give him credit because he built a really strong program in a short amount of time. Talent. It wasn't just him, whole staff, but he was able to hire 45 years of coaching experience, including Rodney Terry, onto his assistant coaching staff and present them to vision. The fact that the program was built on a solid enough foundation without its leader that it could do what it did, that's pretty strong praise for Chris Beard. and the vision he had and the people he was able to bring in.
I think the other thing Chris Beard did was he built like real excitement for this team early on, transitioning into the Moody Center and the students and doing his campfire stuff. Like he had really built an environment that carried that team throughout that coaching change and throughout the year.
Only one loss at the Moody Center. It became the home court advantage the Longhorns wanted, and it will be moving forward for Rodney Terry. As for Rodney, can we see a little audio with Rodney Terry? This is interesting. He got the job on Tuesday. He went recruiting. There's the number one player in the state for the class of 2024. Plays up at Lake Highlands up in the Dallas Metroplex area. But then he was down at the Final Four in Houston. Everybody goes down to the Final Four. I know Rodney wishes he was coaching in that Final Four with his team, but went down there. And Andy Katz, longtime college basketball reporter. I don't even know where he's with. He's still the ESPN, The Athletic, wherever Andy Katz is. This is a pretty nice piece of video. A couple-minute interview with Rodney Terry down in Houston. Now that it's all decided, the dust has settled, 5-year contract, Andy Katz caught up with Rodney Terry to talk about the future of the program.
Rodney, I've been advocating for this for the entire season. Finally, Chris Del Conte gave you the deal, 5 years. You earned it. You deserved it. Now you're the head coach of the University of Texas. It's been a long journey. What are you thinking?
You know what? It's a dream come true. I'm a Texas guy through and through. My administration was great with me throughout the entire process, and it's a great day to be a Longhorn. Hook 'em.
You guys were within a whisker, really, of being here, being in the Final Four. Phenomenal season. Now, it's on you. It's your program. How do you deal with the roster management going forward?
Well, I think, again, our staff's going to do a great job of working with our current players first. And then I think from there, then you start trying to put a team together and put a roster together around your guys that are going to be returning.
Who can return?
Well, I mean, we're still working through that process, too. I mean, we'll start some meetings early part of next week and start talking about guys' futures.
But I know that some guys they can't. They've run out of time. So who are the main guys that still have time on the clock?
Well, guys that still have time on the clock, Tyrese Hunter, Terry O'Mars, Dylan Mitchell's going to have to, weigh some decisions and things as well. Brock Cunningham will be returning for us next year as well. And Dylan DeSue still has opportunity to come back and play for us as well.
All right, so you played Miami. Some of these teams, obviously the old Mountain West State, San Diego State, or, you know these schools. How do you assess this Final Four? Who can get out of here?
Well, it's going to be a very competitive Final Four. I mean, I know Danny Hurley from the days back when he was at St. Benedict, and he's done a great job in his career in terms of his collegiate coaching as well. He's got a really good UConn team. Dutch defense at San Diego State, if you hadn't played it, you better be prepared for it, And Dusty's done an incredible job at FAU, and I've had a chance to compete against his teams that are very well coached. So you got great coaches in this Final Four as well.
Congratulations again, Rodney.
Thanks, Andy. Appreciate you.
All right, there's Rodney Terry with Andy Katz here on the Eyes on Texas podcast and multicast. He kind of short, but he kind of laid out where the roster is. He's going to, 2 phases now, Mike Craven. You got to figure out your coaching staff. I know and I have been told that Chris Ogden would like to move back into that support role off the bench and doing, handling the NIL deals, handling the transfer portal, and just being kind of that CEO, director of the program, director of operations, which they probably will allow him to do because he does want to stay in Austin. Bob Donewald and Steve McClain did such a great job as top assistants. Brandon Chappell. I think most of those guys have an opportunity to come back. Do they come back? Rodney Terry has a really good foundation. I'm sure Rodney wants to go out and add maybe a piece of someone that he's close with, that he knows from his days. Has been talking of an assistant coach up at TCU and some other places. That's first and foremost. And then it's the roster, which in this days and age college basketball, it's forever fluid. It just seems like it's fluid all the way. Who knows who's coming, who's going, who's going to hit the portal, who's going to the NBA. Since we spoke last, really over the weekend, Tyrese Hunter, the point guard, the transfer in from Iowa State, announced he is going to test the waters of the NBA draft. He will not make a final decision or lose his eligibility. Dylan DeSue did this last year. You put your name in the process. You get to go through the process. Probably, I would imagine Tyrese Hunter gets a report of probably not first or second round, which would bring him back, but he'll know what they want him to work on. They'll know where he stands with the NBA, which all these guys want to play professional basketball. But we'll see. He's got until June to make that decision. Rodney Terry would probably like to know a little sooner what Tyrese, his starting point guard, most likely was going to do. I've been told that Dylan Mitchell may make a similar decision and just test it. No one thinks Dylan Mitchell's ready to play in the NBA, but where is his game? If you're draftable in the first 2 rounds, maybe that's a process. And then Dylan DeSue's an interesting one, and heartbreaking for Dylan to not be able to play in that final weekend. As we said, who knows? Maybe they're playing for a national championship if Dylan DeSue doesn't suffer a bone bruise on the top of his foot. Tried to give it a go, but I can't think that's how he wants his Texas career to end.
It feels like that's going to be a Colt McCoy shoulder thing, where that's going to be talked about for like 10, 15,
I think it will.
20 years, because it really does feel like something left on the table, especially with how Miami played in their Final Four game. It's like Texas was better than that team. They just didn't have all their horses, and Carr got bumped and
went to the locker room.
Right, and just they just faded down the stretch, and that can happen in tournament play when you're getting into the third, fourth round and you're missing some of your guys. But if Hunter comes back with Morris, with Mitchell, DeSue, that's a solid core. You add Brock Cunningham in there that can do a little bit of everything. You got a couple 5-star players coming in on the perimeter that can really help you out. And then, like you said, you can always dip into the transfer portal. If we look at this team that just made the Elite Eight, you find 3, 4, 5 of their biggest key pieces. Most of them were transfers, and so you can go in there and find some guys to add a little bit of elder statesmanship to this
veteran
deal.
leader, veteran guys,
some veteran guys to go with this young talent. And because I think in today's basketball world, you have to blend. It's not just all one and dones anymore, right? And it's not going to be all old guys that are in their 6th year. It's going to be the teams that find the biggest blend.
Yeah, and Texas can be right in there, and San Diego State will play for the national championship. They've got 7 seniors and 2 juniors of their 9-man rotation. I mean, they're all 23 years old. They're older than 4 or 5 NBA rosters and starting 5s in the NBA. It's just the way it goes right now. But you're right. I agree with you 100%. I think Rodney and Coach Terry has this on a good track where bring Dylan DeSue, Tyrese Hunter would be a 3rd-year player. Guy like Brock Cunningham, who's a 20th-year player, what he's bringing to the table. And then, Dylan Mitchell comes back, Arterio Morris comes back, and they develop. And they play year 2 as better players, more in the rotation. I know Arterio Morris at times this year was frustrated with his minutes and that he'd get yanked if he made a bad play. But at the same time, Marcus Carr, Serge Jabari Rice, Tyrese Hunter playing all in the backcourt. Not a lot of minutes. Not a lot of minutes. Next year, provided Tyrese Hunter returns, there'll be a lot of minutes for him. And I think Arterio Morris can be a special player on both ends. I think he can be an elite defensive player with his athleticism, his length, his body. And on offense, we saw him shoot it when he got hot, and he can be a developmental player. And the 2 freshmen, obviously, the 5-star kid Ron Holland from Duncanville can be an immediate impact player. While you were in Hawaii, Mike, they had the McDonald's All-American game, and he got more rave reviews than anybody for the week of practice. The game itself, maybe he wasn't a star, but the week of practice, NBA scouts were drooling over his ability to get to the rim. I mean, he's 6'8". He looks like Dylan Mitchell, but he's a better ball handler. He can take it to the rim. He's a physical player to finish, and really a nice player, number 1 player in the state of Texas from Duncanville. And then, A.J. Johnson, a point guard from California, Los Angeles, which is interesting when people have asked, can Rodney Terry recruit? And we have this piece of audio. This is interesting. This was also at the Final Four, and the beginning of it gets a little cloudy with the audio, but it's Rodney Terry and a group of guys talking. And, he's trying to make the case that, hey, just because Chris Beard's not here, we built this roster. We as a staff, I recruited personally 3 of the starters on this team. So let's not worry that the sky is falling on the recruiting trail. Here's Rodney Terry defending his credentials when it comes to attracting the best talent.
Chris is a great coach, and again, someone I respected for over 20 years in the business. But again, Chris didn't put this roster together by himself. We put this roster
Tell
together.
Him again, RT. Tell him again.
I recruited 3 starters.
Tell him again now.
I'm not one to pat myself on the back, but heck, we got in the trenches.
There you go. You ain't got to do that. Don't disrespect you either now. Don't damn disrespect you either now. They ain't do that by himself.
We put this roster together, man. I recruited 3 starters on this roster here, so let's don't get it twisted. But no, hey, you know what? It's a team effort. It's always a team effort, in terms of putting a roster together. I've been at Texas basketball, when we've had the highest of highs. I mean, you could go back to the best 5 seasons in Texas basketball, and I've been a part of them. The entire time. So I know the landscape. I know what it takes to be successful at this university. And, we're going to roll our sleeves up and get after it. We're going to try to get the best guys, not only in the state of Texas, but also around the country and, internationally to come in and represent the university the right way, both on and off the court. But it'll be it'll be a team effort in terms of putting a really good roster together. But, we're here for no other reason to try to win a national championship.
All right, so there's Rodney Terry. Obviously, bristling a little bit at the suggestion he's not a good recruiter. He recruited for Rick Barnes most of the best players on the Rick Barnes rosters while he was here. I mean, his credentials are for recruiting. One of the reasons Chris Beard wanted to bring him to Austin was to recruit and bring in, top players. And as he just said, 3 of the starters, Serge Jabari Rice, Marcus Carr, Timmy Allen. These were guys he was the lead recruiter on. They were the guts of the basketball team this year. So he can recruit. He's got these 2 freshmen that are coming in that are 5 stars. And as we said, already in a good place with the number 1 player in the state of Texas for 2024. Get out of the Metroplex. So we'll certainly follow that. But all in all, you said, I think the most succinct way of saying it, the Texas basketball program is as healthy as it's been in a long time, even amidst a coaching change in the middle of the season.
Yeah, I mean, it's just amazing. It's amazing that these are the conversations we're having and not like, who are they bringing in to fix this thing? And look at all the momentum that was killed by this deal. And for Texas to be where they're at right now, for all the feel good, off the field, on the court, all that kind of stuff, is just a testament to Rodney Terry and that staff. And I'm glad that he was able to to get that job and to get the 5 years. I thought maybe it would be a smaller contract, a less year contract. But I think one of the reasons, we were talking about the Kirk Bowles story earlier, some of that's the school too. They want people to know that their coaches want it.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I think it's one of those deals where he would have been able to land somewhere really good, and I'm glad that Texas just went with the smart
angle
hire.
too. Yeah, for sure, to get it out there that, hey, we weren't bidding against just ourselves here. We needed to keep him. And Chris Del Conte at the press conference last Tuesday called it or maybe it was Jay Hartzell, the president, the longest job interview ever, because really, as of December the 12th with the Rice game, he was on the clock and they were watching. And Chris Del Conte was watching how the players interacted with him, how he interacted with the players.
What odds would you have taken that Rodney Terry would have gotten the job back then? Like if I asked you December 15th.
5%.
Right, exactly. And for them to go win the Big 12 and to get to the Elite Eight, and it was a
well. Let me say,
hell
you
of
know
a
what?
job.
In a moment of thought, I would have higher than that. Only that I knew the roster was really good. So it's one of those things. If they stay healthy and they stay together, and don't let the distraction get in the way, they can be a good team.
I just always worry about Texas making the smart. It's not a splash hire.
Yeah, they're going to want the boosters, of course, get involved, and they want Jay Wright, and they want Eric Musselman. Once he ripped his shirt off, that was it for him. He's out. He's no longer. You can't rip your shirt off at Texas. You're Tom Herman headbutting people all of a sudden. You're out.
Brett Bielema or whatever.
Yes, you're no longer on the list. Who was the president? You're Howard Dean now.
Exactly.
You can't be the president. But yeah, you can't rip your shirt off. But yes, the boosters wanted someone bigger, but Rodney Terry, I think, proved to be the right coach and the right fit. And it keeps consistency and continuity in the program moving forward. Obviously, we'll have this conversation 3-4 years from now, and hopefully we're still rolling with the Eyes on Texas podcast, and we can do that. That's the end of our first quarter. Texas basketball chatter. We'll keep you posted in upcoming editions of the podcast of what Rodney Terry's doing. Obviously, it's a heavy football podcast, but that's too big of a story and development not to address. As we said, coming up in our halftime, we're going to have Mike Craven's big news from his vacation. Very big news. But we do divide it into 4 quarters. Quarter number 2 is back to football. And, it's spring practice. You've covered a lot of them. There's not a lot of breaking news from spring practice. The breaking news is there haven't been any injuries.
Yeah.
Stayed healthy, which is a good thing. But let's in our second quarter, let's get into the offensive side. I wanted to play this sound from Sark and riff on it for a minute. Quinn Ewers is the focus. Quinn Ewers is the conversation. Arch Manning obviously was the conversation of recruiting, but for this team to reach the ceiling that fans and we believe it can reach, Quinn Ewers has to be better than he was last year. And here's the head coach, Steve Sarkisian, talking about maybe the maturity, just the comfortability of Quinn Ewers through the offseason and now through the first 2/3 of spring practice.
Yeah, I think a couple of things from Quinn. I think Quinn had a really good winter conditioning kind of off season. I think he got himself in really good shape. He definitely feels more comfortable. You can almost a sense of, he's throwing the ball very naturally, very comfortably. I think from a decision-making standpoint, the reads are just happening that much quicker, that much more decisive. I think the management of our style of offense, right? The shifts, the motions, the tempos, the varying tempos, all those things of handling that aspect of the game, I think you're seeing growth. I think it just looks like a guy who's in year 2 and is growing into year 2 from a comfort level. Not perfect, and I don't expect him to be perfect right now. I mean, we challenge him every day, and The defense is challenging the offense every day, and we're putting new things in. There's some things we're looking at that maybe we haven't decided, are we going to put and have as a part of our offense? And so that can be challenging on a quarterback because there's some newness to what we're doing. But at the end of the day, I just think his comfort level, but also I think his intent, right? I mean, he was very intentional this offseason of getting himself in a really good space physically and mentally. And I think it's showing throughout the first 8 practices.
All right. So there is Steve Sarkisian. Intentional. I like those words. Growing up a little bit, and physically, there was times where maybe he looked a lot of shape last year, that maybe he wasn't in the best physical condition, and maybe the footwork suffered because of it. Needs to be quicker, more agile with the footwork. And what'd you hear from Sark there that gives you confidence that Quinn Ewers is starting to get this thing?
You talk to a lot of coaches, and they'll tell you the best thing that can happen to a football player is a birthday. Because you grow up. We're talking about kids. It's easy to start thinking of these 5-star can't miss prospects as like grown adults already, that they're just ready made. And he could just throw a football really well, but he had some maturing to do. He didn't go to his senior year of high school. His junior year, he was injured for most of it. And then his freshman year at Ohio State, he played like 10 snaps, And so he just hadn't played a lot of football. And then he gets on the football field. He plays for 5 quarters. And then, he has a shoulder injury. And then he's out for a while. And he came along also in high school right when NIL exploded, and that's why he left early. And I think maybe he was doing it for the wrong reasons, or the focus around him and his family were for the wrong reasons. The Eyes of Texas stuff became a big part of his recruitment. That's why he decommitted from Texas on that weekend. The NIL stuff is why he skipped his senior year of high school. And so I think he's a kid now who has gone, well, if I don't start playing better, the real money on the other side's not going to be there. And so I think he's going to have to grow up and know that room is getting better and better, and he's got a lot in front of him this year.
Agreed. And I think you laid it out perfectly. I mean, he's a 17-year-old kid who skips his high school senior year. Whether that's a good decision or not, time will tell.
Sure.
Hard to begrudge him. He made 7 figures.
I would have done the same thing
while there. But, that was a glorified internship in Columbus, right? He got to be around the program, didn't get to play much, playing behind, C.J. Stroud and what they were doing there. Got to see how a high-level, big-time operation runs. Who knows? Well, it'll be in forever debate. Would he have been better served by playing his senior year and leading South Lake Carroll to wherever they were going to go, or was he better served by moving on? No, we'll never know. But, yeah, you're right. He drops back in here. Again, and Texas has another young quarterback that's got to learn on the job. He gets hurt, and he looked like a guy who hadn't played a lot of football, as you said. He looked at times when he could just stand in the pocket and fling it, looked great. When he had to make some moves and think about it a little for a second, he looked shaky. And that's the evolution. You were around it, and I've been doing this long enough to remember when fans were calling our talk show wanting Vince Young to be moved to wide receiver because he was struggling to be a quarterback early out of Madison, even though he was the number 1 recruit in the nation, much like Quinn Ewers was. And, we've got Chance Mock, move him to receiver. He's never going to make it at quarterback. Okay, well, he turned out to be pretty good. So let's tap the brakes. Let's be patient. And Steve Sarkisian's track record of developing good quarterbacks. And let's also say he's not going to be perfect this year. He's not going to not make mistakes. And let's not do the rush to judgment to put Arch Manning right on the field because he's a young quarterback who's inexperienced. That's what Texas has. They have 3. It's probably the most talented quarterback room they've had in more than a decade. But you have 3 really young, inexperienced quarterbacks. Quinn Ewers is the most experienced. Then it's Arch Manning, and then it's Malik Murphy. So talent, yes. Experience, no.
Yeah, and Murphy's had his own injury stuff where he hasn't played football in a long time with the way California
That's right.
dealt with COVID and all that kind of stuff. And so, they've played 10 combined college football games, between the 3 of them. And so the talent is unquestioned. What they can do with that talent is a big question. And for Texas, when you have so much coming back everywhere else, it does lend itself to being a lot. Not that the Texas quarterback position wasn't going to be filled with pressure, but when 10 of your starters come back and your offensive line looks the way it does and the wide receiver core looks the way it does and the tight end's who he is and the running backs are there, it does feel like the quarterback and how well he plays or doesn't play is going to dictate what the season is.
Yeah, the ceiling of it, most likely, because we'll get to it in our third quarter. The defense getting the better of the offense in the spring so far, which is typically the case. But that defense has a chance to be really deep and really good. We'll talk about some of that side of the ball. But, yeah, the offense. Let's hear from Sark again on he was asked point blank who has really stood out to you through the first 2/3 of camp. They had a big scrimmage this past Saturday. Who's really showing up on a consistent basis? And here was Sark. He cited 2 or 3 players who have caught his eye.
I think one guy that stands out to me right now is Keaton Crawford, who tremendous special teams player for us a year ago. I think he was Big 12 special teams player of the year. This guy was fantastic. He's playing really well at safety for us right now. He's communicating at a high level. He's making plays on the ball. He's playing fast. He's definitely maturing. So he's one guy that definitely stands out to me. Another guy to me that kind of stands out are two guys that are in a healthy competition. I think DJ Campbell and Cam Williams, they're both working hard on the offensive line and showing some positive things there. And then I would say the last guy that makes sense to me that has definitely shown up, a guy who wasn't a frontline starter for us a year ago, but I think is kind of assuming that role of that guy has been Byron Murphy on the defensive line. He's been a force here early on in spring that you feel his presence, and he's tough to block. He creates a lot of negative plays and is really strong at the point of attack.
All right, Mike Craven, there is we'll get to Keaton Crawford, and we're going to get to Byron Murphy because we're going to focus on safeties in the interior D-line in our third quarter on the defensive side. But he mentioned two interior offensive linemen or even outside linemen with Cam Williams and DJ Campbell. You follow those guys on the recruiting trail. Let's start with the conversation with this in our second quarter on the offensive line. I think we can safely feel comfortable to say you have three starters that are going to be hard to beat out right now. Kelvin Banks is going to play left tackle as a sophomore on his way to the NFL if he stays on this trajectory. Christian Jones came back for another year. He's going to start at right tackle and anchor that position. And then Jake Majors started a lot of football games here. He's likely to be your center. I know Kyle Flood likes bigger humans, but, this is your most experienced player at a critical position on your O-line. That leaves two spots. That leaves left guard and right guard. A, do you agree with my assessment of those three spots? And give me your breakdown of left guard, right guard. That's where I think the real competition will be through the end of spring, through the summer, and into fall.
Again, this is a great conversation to be having because it means a good thing for Tech. Like the fact that we have three offensive linemen that we can pencil in, and there's four guards that can compete for two spots is a place Texas hasn't been in a while. I agree that those three guys are going to be hard to beat out. I mean, Kelvin Banks may have the best offensive lineman in the Big 12. Christian Jones, excellent, played a lot of football. Jake Majors, as you said, just a smart kid. He's not going to get off the field. He's not going to be beaten out. And so, for me, Cole Hudson coming back after the spring. What does Hayden Connor look like with another year? I think those guys played really well last year. But DJ Campbell was the number one ranked interior recruit for a reason. Like the kid can really play football. I'd imagine in his second year he's only getting better, and he's getting a lot of snaps this spring that's going to help him out. And then Cam Williams was always an interesting one because anybody who watched him, he blocks out the sun. Like he's a big human around other big
at
humans.
Duncanville, right?
Yes, at Duncanville.
You watch him in the state title games in the playoffs. He just jumps off the. Well, look at that guy. Looks like a mountain.
And he's on the field with it's Duncanville versus North Shore. So it's like 19 of the 22 kids have Division I offers. And if anybody who never watched football is like, who is that guy? I mean, he's just that big of a human. If he can play guard, if he can do both, where he can be a backup right tackle and also compete at guard. I mean, Texas is all of a sudden at a 7-8 man rotation on the offensive line. That's all you can ask for.
They haven't had that in a long time. I think every Texas fan knows that. And then you pronounce the kid Neto's last name for me.
I can't do it either.
All right, Neto is there, and Malik Agbo. Those are two guys that are competing. They're future guys. We need to learn how to say his last name because he's got a brother coming too, I think.
I'm bad. I have a very Caucasian tongue. I am so bad. I'm so bad at pronouncing really anything.
Well, I mean, I think it's odds on it's Hayden Connor and Cole Hudson right now because they finished the year as starters. But DJ Campbell, number one player at guard coming out of Arlington Bowie. Cam Williams, you mentioned. Those guys are going to compete like crazy to try to get those jobs. And that's a great thing for Texas. And there's more depth there than we've seen. So quarterback, young, inexperienced but talented. Offensive line emerging as one of the strengths of the football team in our second quarter. That's going to wrap up quarter two. We'll get into the defensive side. As you heard, safety Keaton Crawford and defensive tackle Byron Murphy. We're going to focus on those two positions here in our in-depth conversation of Texas spring football on episode 4 of the Eyes on Texas podcast. That takes us to halftime. All right, very excited here at our halftime, and I can tell you coming up as we get closer to the football season, we're going to be adding some new features at our halftime segment that you're going to really, really like. We're excited about that, but here during the spring, it's just a time to take a pause, take a drink of water, and get ready. But do want to start with this by saying that we have found and come partnered with our first multicast Eyes on Texas podcast on-air partner and underwriter. which we're always looking to find. We really only want a few. We don't want this to be like a NASCAR and cluttered with sponsorships. We would like to keep it to some founding partners, and they're going to grow with us. And one of those is a good friend of mine, Carlos Carrion, the Texas mortgage guy. And Carlos is born and raised here in Austin, Texas. He's an avid Longhorn fan. He, like me, graduated from St. Edwards a little bit later than I did. He's younger than me, but he's got 7 years in the mortgage industry. And he's not just here to provide you a quote for a mortgage or a refi. He's here to help you solve problems and really strategize on the most important financial decisions that you'll make for a new home and a mortgage, or certainly for a refinance of some kind. They're closing loans in 15 days at TexasMortgageGuy.com. Great communication, fast response times. Not one of these things where you can't get a hold of him. None of that. It's Carlos Carrion. Find Carlos at TheTexasMortgageGuy.com. That's TheTexasMortgageGuy.com. We'll get a banner ad up here running as we go, but there's also a website, TheTexasMortgageGuy.com. You can find Carlos on Instagram, Facebook page at The Texas Mortgage Guy as well. Carlos Carrion, The Texas Mortgage Guy. Huge Longhorn fan. If you want to do business with a great person who's upstanding, going to take care of you for that huge decision, do it with my good buddy Carlos. You will not go wrong, I promise you. We're not going to bring underwriters and partners on that we are going to be worried about you working with. Carlos is the best you're going to find, I promise you. That's TexasMortgageGuy.com. Carlos at TexasMortgageGuy.com is his email. Get a hold of him, and he'll help you get that going for a mortgage and a refi. All right, let's get to the breaking news from Hawaii. Mike Craven, we didn't do a podcast last week. You went to Hawaii on a beautiful spring trip, and some major breaking news for you. Go ahead and let us know what went on.
Yeah, so I got engaged. I did that.
Tied up, baby.
I did that.
Locked it down.
If you're wondering why, she's up on the screen right now.
There you go. Look at this, Nolan. Good job.
Outkicked the coverage tremendously.
You said you met her down by when you were working at the Statesman at the Taco Plus?
She works at TexDot. I worked at the Statesman at the time. Our offices were in the same parking lot, and there's a place there called Taco Joint, which I love. I love that place. There's a couple locations in Austin. Figured out her taco order. My dog's name is Taco. I kind of worked that into the line as well. And so about 2 years of pandemic relationship. We met in the pandemic, so we had nothing to do but hang out with each other. So that worked out well for me, probably not so well for her. But, yeah, when you ask her, I asked her in Kauai, and I did it. You may
Hold on, I want to hear how you did it. Tell me her name.
Her name is Hannah.
Hannah, okay.
Okay.
Now, I need to hear the layout of how you did it, because you did it the right way.
Right.
I mean, look at the view of that.
Look at the view.
Exactly. So
you did it romantically,
you
two.
We landed on Sunday, right? And my thought was, I'm going to do it early. That way it sets the tone. And she had no idea. That way it sets the tone for the rest. She can't get mad at me on Thursday if she's been proposed to on Monday, right? Like, it was going to make the vacation even better for me. So Monday morning, she's a hiker. So Monday morning, we got up at like 5:30 in the morning because we were still used to our time.
Okay, before you continue, I don't want to interrupt, but I'm getting the picture here that you did this right. Unlike this guy, I don't know if you saw this while you were gone. Here's a guy at opening night of the Dodgers game. They're playing the Diamondbacks. Yeah. I'm thinking this is not the way to get engaged. Can we see some of this here on the Eyes on Texas pod? All right, so he runs out to center field. There's the wife.
Oh, dude, that is mean, bro. He did not have to do that.
Oh, there you go. That's a nice piece of audio. What'd you say over there, Nolan? You didn't have to do that?
He did not have to do that. That was
It was
mean.
uncalled for.
Hey, his job is to get that man on the ground. Don't jump on the field. But so
broke his neck.
I give it to him for dedication.
Give him whiplash.
There's dedication to that.
I think he's got a broken collarbone. That's the hardest. I don't know if a Texas player has hit anybody that hard in football since Brian Westbrook in Notre Dame or something.
Like Nathan Basher on that punt returner from
Tony
Texas
Bracken's
Tech
on John McAfee back in the day. But Mike Craven, just have some fun with that. You did a better job.
Yeah, I did a better job. There was nobody up there. I mean, that was like right at sunrise. That's 6:30 in the morning right there. We got to the top of that canyon. And in Kauai, it's got the Grand Canyon of the Pacific and Waimea Canyon. And so it was a lot of fun. It was a great time. And then we, just hung out for the next 4 or 5 days.
Perfect. Well done. Back. Congratulations, my friend.
Yeah.
Congrats.
Second time for me. So, trying to get to the third time is the charm, that required.
You were married previously.
I was.
Okay.
I was. I try to forget it, but,
Hey, you practice. Practice makes
exactly.
perfect. Or as my man Bucky Godbolt tells me all the time, perfect practice makes perfect.
Right,
So.
and it was not that. So we'll see. We'll see how this next one goes.
Well, you'll keep us posted here on the pod and the Eyes on Texas multicast of when the weddings. We'll have pictures from your wedding. Well, you will come. I don't know. However you're going to do it. All right, there it is. That's our halftime broadcast or halftime program brought to you by Carlos Carrion, the Texas Mortgage Guy. Carlos at TexasMortgageGuy.com. That's where you're going to find him all over his socials as well. Appreciate him jumping on board with the multicast. Let's move to the third quarter, which is, as we said, going to be the defensive side of the ball, and it's going to be hinging on Steve Sarkisian's thoughts about standout players. We heard him earlier say Byron Murphy, who's just a wrecking ball. He's a DeSoto kid, right? Byron Murphy, because Texas is really building a pipeline with Claude Mathis' team, Jonte Cook and Trey Wisner, but also Byron Murphy out of that DeSoto program. Gosh, South Dallas has turned into a gold mine for the Longhorns in recruiting. But let's hear Sark also on Alfred Collins. Alfred Collins, who, gosh, we know him from Bastrop Cedar Creek High School. Mother played basketball at UT. He's got all the potential in the world. And maybe the light's going on for Alfred here. Finally found a position he's comfortable in. Here's Sark talking about Alfred and his progress through this spring practice.
I think Alfred has taken another step, right? We talked a lot about Alfred a year ago about, it wasn't about the talent, it was about the consistency in the play and his style of play. And when Alfred plays that way, which he's doing right now, where he's consistent at the point of attack, he can use his length, he has great athleticism, he can close on the ball. When he plays really violent, like he's doing right now, he's a real problem. And I think that we've seen that here the first half of spring from him.
Real problem. And that's, let's focus on the interior D-line. Right now, Keandre Coburn and Moro Ojimo are off to the NFL. They're going to, be drafted in April, whether it's Friday or Saturday, probably Saturday for both of those guys. But you have Byron Murphy, who's Sark cited as a guy who's really emerging as a consistent every down player for them on the interior. Tavondre Sweat came back. To me, that's the defensive equivalent of Christian Jones, right? You got an extra year out of a guy that could have moved on, and he's experienced. He's a big, massive human being,
big man,
who can be in that rotation. And then there's Alfred Collins, who has the highest ceiling of all of these people. And then you're dealing with Vernon Broughton, Jure Bledsoe, for the freshman Sadir Mitchell. Again, like we talk about the offensive line, it's a pretty good rotation of players. A couple of those guys, Byron Murphy and Alfred Collins, maybe even Sweat, will play in the NFL. And Alfred Collins can be the pivotal factor there on the interior. We also found out this week that during the spring, from some of the insider reports out there, that Texas debuted a heavy package on defense, where they started 4 defensive tackles essentially, and they had Murphy and Sweat with Collins and Broughton flanking them. I mean, that's that's an interesting look for Pete Kwiatkowski, but we know Collins has that quick twitch and can get off the edge a little bit. That's interesting. That just throwing a little wrinkle at the offense in a spring scrimmage, but they've got some dudes over there.
That's 1,300 pounds of man up front in the defensive line. And with Alfred, I think Sark hit it right on the nail. Right, he's around him more than we are. It's always been about the unlocking the aggressiveness in Alfred Collins. He's a basketball player by nature. His mom played basketball. He wanted to be a basketball player, never really thought about playing football. He just got so big, and he was so good at it and dominant at Bastrop Cedar Creek that, it became his route. He was going to being a 6'6", post player. It's not very big, right? Being a 6'6" defensive tackle, you can do a lot of things
long
there.
Arms.
Right, 22 size foot or whatever. Like you can do a lot of stuff there. So it was always about his potential, but it was about his mentality, and not everybody's built for that. And it sounds like he's becoming more and more aggressive, more and more violent, as Sark said. And if he can unlock that, if he can untap that just within the lines, you don't have to be a monster everywhere. You just got to be one when you're playing football. If he can figure out that part of it, he's got as much talent as anybody that Texas has on their football team. I mean, he's that talented.
Maybe in the Big 12.
It's
Maybe in the
how
Big
you
12.
create a football player.
Well, he's a 5-star player,
Yeah.
just based on that raw material. Byron Murphy was a high 4 or 5-star player that also could maybe flip the switch. And Sweat and Murphy are kind of your proven commodities like that. And again, we'll talk about it every Eyes on Texas pod here. You have to. Here's a pressure rate stat that is just huge. Texas was number 2 in the country in pressure rate last year, behind Clemson, right? Pressure rate, pressuring the quarterback. Clemson was number 1 and had over 45 sacks. Texas was number 2 and had 27 sacks, right? So the pressure was there. They weren't converting them to sacks. That's what's got to change. That's the number one focus of the defense. Because if you can get more, and we'll talk in future podcasts about the edge players and who's coming as we go. We're sticking to the interior. But a guy like Alfred Collins, if he can step up and be a 6 or 7, 8 sack guy from the interior, along with Byron Murphy, well, now you're converting those pressures into sacks. That's for college football right now. You got to be able to intimidate and hit quarterbacks.
And T'Vondre Sweat, for as big as he is a really good interior pass rusher.
Yeah.
He's somebody to get pressure in your
Think
face.
about the Alabama game last year.
He played defensive end at Huntsville when he was in high school. Had like 4.5 sacks one game that I was at. And so like he can get after the passer too. I think this group of defensive linemen is better at that than the last group of defensive linemen.
Yeah, the Coburn Ojima.
Right. Like they are better at getting out after the passer. Will they be as good at covering up the linebackers and stopping the run and being consistent? We'll have to find that out. But in terms of just raw talent and getting to the quarterback, these are the guys that can do that.
All right, interior D-line, a focus in our third quarter here on the Eyes on Texas pod. Let's flip it to safety because you heard it earlier, Keaton Crawford. Keaton Crawford, an interesting name. That was the first guy Sark mentioned when he talked about who's been standing out. Number 21, he looks bigger. I remember when my who's the former defensive backs coach? My friend is now at Mississippi State. Gosh, dang it.
Jason Washington.
Jason Washington. I remember I talked to him one night. He was driving out to, I said, where are you going, coach? And he was like, I'm going to John Tyler High to see this Keaton Crawford. I said, what's he all about? Oh, he's a corner, super fast. But it turns out that at John Tyler, you probably remember this, Mike, from your recruiting covering days, he was more of an offensive player at John Tyler, and they would use him on defense in situations against a really good receiver. Just kind of do the Bill Belichick thing. This guy, we don't have anybody else that can cover this guy. Let's put Keaton over here and let him neutralize their best receiver. But didn't play it all full time, more of an offensive player. Then he gets here and he's a corner. Now they move him as safety. When we talk about Quinn Ewers and these guys where their heads are spinning, I think Alfred Collins can be in that conversation too. He's moved positions. But when you're moving from cornerback then to safety, and you're trying to learn on the job, safety is a totally different animal than cornerback. And the view of the game, your role within the defense, the physicality you have to play with, and the big bodies you're going to deal with, different animal. But it is interesting. He was always a super plus athlete coming out of John Tyler High. And maybe, the light's coming on. He's grown into his body, and he's starting to figure out how to play safety.
His problem's the opposite of Alfred's. Like, I saw Keaton Crawford get kicked out of a 7-on-7 tournament. Like he's an intense dude. I'm not surprised that he is a great special teams player because he's a dog. Like that's just who he is. I think safety is a better fit for him. His athleticism goes from decent for a corner to great for a safety. I think that's where college football and all football in general is moving. You love those safeties who can cover and play against those positionless type offensive players that are becoming more and more prevalent. And with Jalen Catalon out for the spring, it provides him an opportunity, and I'd imagine he's read and seen everywhere, assuming Catalon's going to be the starter. It's going to be Catalon and Jaron Thompson. He's not going to have a place there. He's probably taking that personally, right? He's a competitive guy, and that's what you want to see is guys see opportunities and go get opportunities and not give up those spots as easily as maybe we project them to.
We're not being a broken record or redundant, but every position we focus on here is depth continues to become the word because you mentioned it. Jalen Catalon will come back. He's the Arkansas transfer. Jaron Thompson was Mr. Reliable last year in the back end for them. There's still, Larry Turner Gooden, the freshman, B.J. Allen. Tell me about B.J. Allen. That was a kid who was one of the highest recruited safeties in the state coming out. He's a big-time potential player. He's competing. Michael Taff, Mr. Reliable, who can bounce around from Westlake High School. But B.J. Allen's a guy that we don't talk about a lot.
Yeah, the fact that he's not finding his way into first team, maybe even second team reps, I think shows what that depth is and how talented that defensive back roster is now. Yeah, really good player out of Alito. His brother's coming as well. I think he's about to be a senior that is committed to Texas too. So just a really athletic guy that maybe can step into that. I think you start as an embryo on special teams, and you kind of earn your way there. Maybe that's his way, to a position.
I like it. That's safety, interior D-line. We also focused on the quarterbacks and the offensive line in our focus is here in spring. That's how we'll do it. Next multicast number 5. We'll hit the corners, we'll hit the edges, maybe a little bit of linebacker as well. Really depends on where Sark and the conversation takes us, but that's where it went tonight with those guys. Keaton Crawford, Jalen Catalon, Jaron Thompson. We'll also get into the star position next week on our podcast too, because the star's loaded. Jalen Gilbo, who's going to win that spot? How do they sort that out? It's a good problem. They have a lot more depth than we've seen before. And when we get to corner next week, that's also a really good position where they could have really, really good players on the outside. which is where this program is wanting to take it. All right, so there's our third quarter. We're going to flip into our fourth quarter now. That's how we break it up. Conversation, that'll be the case into the football season as well, as we'll hit 4 quarters of conversation, separate the topics, and really go inside. But the fourth quarter is about recruiting. And Mike, you're with Dave Campbell's Texas Football Now, doing great work. And we're going to find out where your travels will take you here coming up in the month of April. But before that, you did the Fab 55 at the Austin American Statesman, so recruiting is your wheelhouse. We did have a piece of news while you were getting engaged in Hawaii. Deuce Robinson, the last remaining 5-star talent unsigned, committed to USC. He was the tight end from Arizona, big-time tight end prospect. Also baseball. And Texas and Georgia were in on it, but kind of felt like a USC push. USC got the commitment over the weekend, or over last week, so Deuce Robinson off the board. Tight end's a position we'll focus on for Texas coming up. Sounds like they're a little bit thin there with Jatavion Sanders at the top, but who's the next couple? They kind of held a scholarship for Deuce, and it's not going to happen.
Yeah, and I mean, you can't ever get mad at a guy for going and playing for Lincoln Riley's
No.
offense. And those are two, it's like Georgia probably fell out of the race when Monken left, and so it was like Sark or Lincoln Riley. And with NIL and all that kind of stuff, I'm not surprised USC, but he's a really good football player. And I'll be surprised. It'd be interesting to see if he even plays college football.
Yeah, some people think he wants to play baseball more.
Yeah, right.
He sees the longevity and the contracts in Major League Baseball.
And you can always come back to football.
Yeah, you could. The Kyler Murray deal.
Yep.
And a lot of good money being made in Major League Baseball, and you can play a lot longer, quite honestly. Big 6'6" guy. Not as big as Aaron Judge, but I think that's kind of how he projects himself as a great athlete who's got that size to him. But word out of the junior days, I know you were in Hawaii, so maybe not as much intel as you normally would bring, but Texas had a big junior day. The week they had the coaches clinic during spring break, or coming out of spring break. All went well, appointed big barbecue, building those relationships. From your coverage of and the recruiting trail, how important are those early events in the spring to start to build those bonds, relationships, face-to-face conversations?
I think they're massive, and sometimes for the reasons that people don't think about. I don't think it's necessarily about being around the staff as much or being around the campus as much. I think it's about being around those other recruits.
Yeah.
And you start having those conversations. You start building some friendships. You start going, hey, is this a place we want to go together? Is this a place that we want to go together? Like, cliques exist within recruiting. And so, with Texas moving into the SEC, with all this momentum that it feels like they have off the field, it feels like they're turning that corner. And those junior days can be really big, seed planting days to kind of start that, 5, 6, 7, 8 guys kind of get together at a junior day, and all of a sudden they got a group text, and now they're going to the same school. And so I think for those reasons, the junior days are big.
Agreed. And one big name that's out there, I keep seeing a lot of headlines and conversation about this kid, Micah Hudson.
He's really good.
He's from Temple, Texas, Lake Belton High School, one of the top receivers, number 5 overall prospect in the country. What are we hearing on Micah Hudson? He's a kid that everybody wants.
Yeah, I mean, think Garrett Wilson. Like, that's who Micah Hudson is. About the same size, same speed, like Spider-Man, catches every single thing that he touches. I think the dark horse there is Texas Tech.
Interesting.
Texas Tech's really in the mix. Zach Kitley, that offensive coordinator there, throws the ball all over the yard. I mean, that's an old school air raid, throw the ball 500 times a year. And Texas Tech's got more NIL money than people think. Cody Campbell, some of those guys. Exactly. They get $25,000 already a person, per player there for the Matador Club. So they're a real player in it. But he's going to be a guy that takes it down to the stretch, and he's going to have any choice of any school that he wants to. I would imagine Ohio State, Texas, Texas Tech end up being, the 3 mostly in the mix. And right now, Ohio State's wide receiver U. So Ohio State's always going to be in the mix there. I think Texas, for obvious reasons, in the mix, but I don't think Texas Tech is just lip service. He's really thinking about it being out there.
Texas, Alabama, Oklahoma, Ohio State, you mentioned. Texas Tech is in there. 6 foot 185, kind of the same size as Garrett Wilson, but just springy legs and great hands. Great with the ball in the air at the high point.
Good basketball player.
Yeah, well, much like Garrett Wilson was at Lake Travis.
Yep.
And Texas, of course, hired new wide receivers coach Chris Jackson. He's in the mix, and reports that his connection with Hudson, it's one of the guys he's keeping a lot of conversation with. That's the kind of guy, because he, of course, came from the NFL and the Jacksonville Jaguars, can sell the NFL experience a little bit on that recruiting trail. We will have a recruiting segment every week on the Eyes on Texas podcast as the news develops. That will be absolutely a rock and a solid thing we will do each and every week here on the Eyes of Texas pod. Also, so here in the month of April, Mike, to wrap things up here in our fourth quarter of episode number 4, and congratulations again on the the pending nuptials for you.
Thank you.
But you've got a real job. I have a real job. You can hear me every morning on B&E on the Horn here in Austin, Texas. But you have Dave Campbell's Texas Football, where you have to write stories and stuff, right? So in the month of April, everybody's in spring practice. You're going to be traveling all over the state and writing stories about Texas spring practice. What's your itinerary?
It starts tonight. After this is over, I drive to Houston. I go to Rice, Houston, and then UTSA this week. So 3 stops this week. Going to do UTEP over the phone. Don't think I have the time to get out to El Paso this time around. And then next week, it's TCU on a Monday, North Texas on a Tuesday, SMU on a Wednesday, Baylor on a Thursday. After that, it's Texas A&M. So I try to go, we got 13 FBS schools in the state. I try to stop at each of them. Like I said, may not get to UTEP this spring, but it's a lot of fun. You kind of, you get a one-on-one with the head coach, which is nice. Talk to some coordinators, talk to some players, get in those buildings. Because the one thing about being in my position or being like a kind of a senior writer or somebody, you're never there enough, right? Like you're not a beat writer. You're not there every single day. So the more opportunities you have to kind of go get in front of everybody, the better it is. And it makes for a better magazine. And that's kind of what we're doing in April and May at Dave Campbell's.
Can't wait to read them. And obviously we hope as we wrap up our spring practice coverage after the spring game and then beyond, we'd like to do an every week feature on an opponent for the Longhorns in the upcoming season, how their spring went, and have coaches' conversations here on the big screen behind me. The teams Texas will play out of the state of Texas in the upcoming year. And we know the upcoming schedule I think there are only 2 games outside the state where they play at Alabama and they play at Iowa State. Every other game is here in the Lone Star State. So we'll start those after spring practice wraps up. And obviously Mike will have a head start having talked. You're going to put a lot of miles on the car in the coming weeks, it sounds like.
Yeah, we're going to get some more Marriott points to make up for the ones I just used in Kauai.
Hey, start rebuilding. All right, that's going to do it for episode number 4 of the Eyes on Texas multicast. Remember, you'll be able to find us on Spotify, iTunes, and certainly where we really want you to download and send out to your friends will be our YouTube page and our YouTube shows. We know that's why we have all the highlights. And Nolan Hogan, our producer, our digital producer, does a great job of bringing you those. So we have Sark audio. We've got pictures of Mike's fiance now. We got Hawaii. We got all kinds of cool stuff, and you got to watch that to see it. But all you got to do is go to YouTube. You'll find it at the Republic of Football and Dave Campbell's Football Podcast. Also, hornfm.com. The Horn page on YouTube will have it as well. We're live from the Austin Radio Network here in Austin, Texas. He is Mike Craven. I'm Erin Hogan. Appreciate Griffin Hogan, our on-site producer. Also Nolan Hogan, our on-site digital producer. He'll be pumping out the social media and all of the alerts here coming up over the coming 7 days until we record another one. That will be episode 5, Mike. We'll have another big Texas scrimmage in. And obviously next week when we record, you may be on the road. We may have you up there on a Zoom call behind me, but we will get the details, and we'll have to be previewing, we're looking forward to previewing the spring game, which will be coming up the following Saturday. Have a wonderful Easter. It's Easter weekend. Good Friday on Friday, Easter on Sunday. Celebrate that with your family. It's also Masters weekend, looking like a rainy one. Are you a golf fan? You have an odds pick for the Masters? Anybody jump out?
My money's on John Rahm, I think.
John Rahm.
Yeah.
Scotty Scheffler goes in as confident as any defending champ we've seen in a long, long time in Augusta. Jordan Spieth's playing well. Rory.
Give me Rory.
Yeah, I'm going to put Rory McIlroy out there as a name. The way I watched him here in Austin at the Dell Match Play, putting was better, and if he can putt, he can bomb it straighter than anybody. The little Northern Irishman.
Have you been out there?
I have.
It's
I have.
great. It's like it really,
it's fun.
It's an incredible.
But it's hard to doubt Scotty Scheffler after being out there to see him, because he played. He won the Players. He won in Phoenix. He played all the way into the Final Four, and if he makes a 5-foot putt on the second playoff hole, he beats Sam Burns and probably wins the Dell Technologies Match Play again. No one playing better in the world right now than Scotty Scheffler, the lifetime Longhorn. Jordan Spieth, of course, he hadn't won a green jacket in 8 years now. Time flies. Time flies. Amazing. It's 2016 when Jordan went on that incredible run. It's now 2023. But rain in the forecast at Augusta, not rain here for Texas football. All right, that's the Eyes on Texas podcast. I want to thank our friend Carlos Carrion, the Texas mortgage guy, for becoming our first partner and underwriter. Find him, Carlos, at txmortgageguy.com and the website there. Mike, thanks. Safe travels. We'll check in with you next week.
Appreciate it. See you then.